תגיד להם שם, מאיר.
Hello. Good afternoon for all of those who joined us in the last minute. My name is Adva Belchinsky. I'm the Consul for Public Diplomacy in the Israeli Consulate. We will start our webinar now, and I want first of all to thank all of you who joined us in this critical moment. I want to thank our speakers. We will present them in a minute. But before that, I want to tell you that for Israel, this webinar is very important. We wanted to establish and to have this webinar in order that we could stress the importance of this subject, not only to one country or the other, but we have participants here from all over the world. So it's a phenomenon, unfortunately, that touches each and every one of us. But if we're speaking about Israel and the US and in the context of Israel in New York, we are dealing with a relationship with Israel and New York. I believe that doing this together,
אני בוובינר ואני לא שומעת כלום, אולי תבוא לעזור לי, אולי לך יהיה איזה תובנה, למה אני לא שומעת אותה? זה לא קרה לי עוד, זה בזום.
Thank you. I'm sorry for this technical issue. For those who didn't hear me in the last 20 seconds, to have this webinar, Israel and New York together demonstrates the shared values Israel and the US and New York has. We brought people from New York City, Tel Aviv City, and then the NGO life of each and every one of those cities and countries. And we believe that demonstrates the social impact we have here also as a civil society. And I hope that this will lead us to work and partner with our shared values and to have share knowledge with each other in order we could try and make this world and place a better and a safe place for each and any one of us. I'm honored to have here today with us Cecile Noel, the Commissioner of New York City in the Mayor's Office to end domestic violence and gender-based violence. We also have here from the civil society, Honorable Judge Judy Harris Kluger, Executive Director of the Sanctuaries for Families. We'll have Rochelle Saidel today that she will moderate this conversation. She is the founder and Executive Director of Remember the Women Institute, and Zilit Yaacobson, the Chairperson of Melech NGO in Israel and the Deputy Mayor of Tel Aviv City, where I was born and raised, Zippi Frank. So thank you again for joining us, and Rochelle, the Zoom is yours.
Okay, thank you, Consul Adva Belchinsky, Consul for Public Diplomacy at the Israel Consulate in New York, and I am Dr. Rochelle Saidel, founder and director of the Women Institute. We're very pleased to be co-sponsoring this webinar today on such a timely and urgent subject. This is, of course, a universal issue with reports of increasing incidences all over the world of domestic violence during this pandemic. And while today we're focusing on New York, the United States, Aviv and Israel, we know, of course, that this discussion has global implications and is happening everywhere and in increasing numbers during the pandemic. If you have questions, please use the chat icon at the bottom of the screen, and at the end of our discussions, we're going to try to address your questions. Those of you who remember the Women Institute, you know that I and the Institute have been dealing mostly with women during the Holocaust and sexual violence, but we made a leap domestic violence when the Israel Consulate connected us with Israeli artist Karen Goldstein, who has created an exhibition based on victims' clothing, and it's entitled She's Gone. We've been working with Karen, and we're going to have a symposium on December 1, which is co-sponsored by the Human Rights Program at Roosevelt House Hunter College and Women and Gender Studies Hunter College, in cooperation with other organizations working on this issue of domestic or intimate partner violence. And this will be in New York at Roosevelt House on December 1. And participants will include the Israel Consulate and the artist Karen Goldstein and Commissioner Cecile Noel from the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, who you're going to hear from in a minute. And there will be others from the field as well. So we had planned to do this coming December long before the pandemic started, and now it's even more important. Please watch for more information or visit rememberwomen.org to see what's happening in December. But right now, I'm honored to introduce Commissioner Cecile Noel, who heads the New York City Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence. The office was established in 2001, and Commissioner Noel was appointed to her position in 2015. Since 2018, the office's responsibility and authority include not only intimate partner or domestic violence and elder abuse, but also sexual assault, stalking, and human trafficking. And today, Commissioner Noel will focus on the purpose in fighting domestic violence during the COVID-19 pandemic. We welcome Commissioner Noel.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am so honored to be part of today's event, to be in the presence of my fellow panelists. Thank you, Zippi Brand-Frank, the Deputy Mayor of Tel Aviv-Yafo, and to Zilit Yaacobson, Chairperson of Melech, and the Honorable Judy Kluger, who is a friend and colleague, and she is the Executive Director of the program Sanctuary for Families. And thank you also to Dr. Rochelle Saidel for moderating today's panel. Finally, to the Council General of Israel of New York, my deepest gratitude for hosting this important dialogue. I am thrilled we have come together to lend today's audience our combined expertise and thoughts in the fight to end domestic and gender-based violence. With that, I would like to give special thanks to the many who have joined us today for this webinar. I hope we can provide you with information and resources that brought you to this event. And I want to point out that webinars like these are vital in our efforts to help survivors, especially in this age of social distancing. We all know the many effects of social distancing, including how it can create a sense of isolation for many, and particularly for survivors. Imagine what survivors are up against during this health crisis. They are experiencing an overwhelming sense of isolation. It is my hope that today's webinar will help survivors know that they are not alone, that they are never alone, and help is here for them. As the Commissioner of the Mayor's Office to End Domestic and Gender-Based Violence, I cannot stress enough that survivors need us now more than ever in these extraordinary times. Our top priority remains the continuity of services and unwavering support. Our family justice centers continue to provide critical crisis support and advocacy by connecting survivors to immediate safety planning, shelter assistance, legal consultation, and emergency and financial relief and more. COVID-19 puts into sharp focus the vulnerabilities that many people in our city face every day, especially survivors of domestic and gender-based violence. This public health crisis also highlights the barriers and challenges that we know keep people from finding safety. And we will continue to do all that we can to identify best practices and innovate approaches to enhance our services for survivors. We must continue to work together to find creative and unique impactful ways to help survivors during these increasingly challenging times. Domestic and gender-based violence was here before COVID-19, and it will be here when the crisis passes. So I want to encourage all of you, everyone participating in this webinar, to be an upstander, to be the difference in the lives of survivors by offering them your support. We need sustained collaboration, and we need your compassion to continue to tell survivors that they are not alone and that help is available for them. New York City operates the domestic violence hotline, which is 1-800-621-4673 or 1-800-621-HOPE. Or they can go to the New York City resource directory, which is NYC HOPE. And the website is nyc.gov/NYC HOPE for information and resources. We need to ensure that survivors know that help is available and that they know how to reach out for us in this time. And we need to be able to contact them in ways that make sense for them, given the social distancing that they are facing. And it's also important to remember that the folks who deliver these services need help also. And so I'm going to say that for those of you who deliver care to survivors, please remember to be kind to yourselves and to practice self-care. And if you are experiencing stress or feel anxious, please reach out for help. New York City offers help and support by calling 1-800-NYC-WELL. That's 1-888-692-9355 or texting WELL or 65173. Remember, and I think what today will evoke from all of us is that we have strength in numbers. We can help survivors, and together we will get beyond this health crisis and we'll get to the other side. And it will be important that we continue to let survivors of domestic and gender-based violence know that we're here for them and that services are available and that all they need to do is reach out. So thank you, and I look forward to this important conversation with everyone. So, Rochelle, I turn it back to you.
I think Rochelle was on mute, so.
And I didn't quite unmute. Muted now?
You're unmuted now, yes.
Okay, sorry. Thank you, Commissioner Noel. And in addition to government responses to this double pandemic, there are non-governmental for-profit agencies that have also been on the front line. One of the most important service providers and advocates for survivors of domestic violence in New York City is Sanctuary for Families, headed by our next guest, the Honorable Judy Harris Kluger. Since Judge Kluger became executive director in 2014, Sanctuary for Families has launched the pro bono project of the Queens Human Trafficking Intervention Court, the Incarcerated Gender Violence Survivors Initiative, expanded the organization's economic empowerment program, and realigned its clinical practice. Judge Harris Kluger, we welcome you, and please tell us how Sanctuary for Families is working to alleviate some of the problems that accompany the COVID-19 virus pandemic. Welcome, please.
Thank you so much, and thank you all for inviting me to be part of this conversation. And it is especially wonderful to be partnering with Commissioner Noel, who you just heard from, who has done so much to advance our efforts to address gender violence during the pandemic. Sanctuary for Family is a 35-year-old organization that provides legal assistance, counseling, job training, and shelter to victims of gender violence, in addition to doing advocacy and outreach and systems change advocacy for gender violence survivors. We help about 10,000 survivors a year. So COVID has exacerbated the difficulties that these clients have even before this crisis. Our service model was basically an in-person service model. And what that meant was that clients came to our office, we went to court with them, our job training program was in-house. So we knew we had to pivot pretty quickly to provide the services that were needed more than ever, but needed to be provided remotely. We had some sense that there was going to be a shelter in place in New York a couple of weeks before it actually happened. And we began to outfit everyone for remote services, our lawyers, our counselors, our job training, and prepare our shelters for what we felt was an inevitable outbreak, which thankfully we have not had. So what happened was we changed our whole service provision. So we never thought that counseling could be done effectively in a remote way. But we were able to access a platform, a telehealth platform that provide HIPAA compliant, which is some requirements we have in New York, as well as interactive counseling for clients and their children. For the first time, I was a judge in New York State for about 25 years and was a judge during the time of 9/11 and Hurricane Sandy. And never before, even at those times, were the courts completely shut except for virtual appearances. But that's what happened after COVID-19 and the shelter in place. But we knew we still had to provide our clients with protective orders and other emergency issues relative to their particular situations. So we geared up with the family courts mostly, and created a system whereby we could still apply for protective orders and get the remedies that were available at the courts. Essentially, these were conference calls with judges, and mechanisms were in place to ensure that our clients got what they needed in addition to a paper order of protection if they needed to show that. Our job training program was essentially a 4.5-month in-person training program. Clients came to our offices, had classes from 9:30 in the morning to 2:30. We provided Metro cards for them to come back and forth. I just want to give an aside plug to the commissioner who, when she was the Human Resources Administration Deputy Commissioner, made sure that this program was funded. And we took many clients from the domestic violence shelters around the city. But how could we provide this service and still do this in a remote way? Thanks to a very generous donor on Sanctuary's board, we provided our clients with laptops, remote access, hotspots, internet access, so that they could, by Zoom, continue their job training. And that has worked out remarkably well, so well that we think when this is all over, it might be a model we will be using going forward. And about a week or two ago, I Zoomed into their class, and it was quite something to see many of these clients who are in shelter, many who have their kids at home and are trying to homeschool and take care of children, be at their desks, interacting with the teachers and really providing and receiving the support that they needed. We extended our helpline hours. We had a legal helpline, and we are getting many, many calls. We enlisted pro bono lawyers from many law firms around New York City. We have a staff of about 50 lawyers of our own, but we were able to leverage our relationships with the law firms to provide the support and the assistance our clients needed. And like so many who are affected by this crisis, there's job insecurity, there's unemployment, food insecurity, isolation. We are seeing clients who may not know that they can get the help that they need because an abuser may say to them, you know, the courts are closed, you can't get help. And that is actually what one of our lawyers recounted to me. There's also an increase in abuse using technology that we're seeing, and that is a crime in New York State, and we make efforts to make sure that people are held accountable for that. What was, again, some of the most, I call them small silver linings, because there aren't many silver linings to this crisis, but heightened awareness of domestic violence by the media and the community, new ways to provide service to clients, as I said, but also outreach and support. We have a group called the Survivor Leadership Group, and they are prior sanctuary clients who want to be part of the solution. And they created a guide, which I am happy to share, that has been shared on social media tens of thousands of times, how to handle being in an abusive situation during the COVID crisis. And, you know, as we know and have known for a long time at Sanctuary, we learn from our clients because they are the ones that have been in this kind of life, and they can give us the tools and help us. So that's something, another small silver lining. And thanks to the commissioner and others, you know, we have spoken to our city council to make sure that there is support and continued support for domestic violence survivors, gender violence survivors, and have done outreach. Sanctuary partnered with another organization, and we have signs on taxis in New York City saying there's help available. And, you know, New York is a very philanthropic community, and a community that wants to help many, not just gender violence survivors. And we've really seen people stand up in a way that I don't think I've seen before. So again, another small silver lining. And just to bring it back to the Israel-US New York relationship, about 6.5 years ago, I was invited by WIZO to speak to a committee at the Knesset about domestic violence and what we were doing in terms of integrated courts. So it's a little bit coming full circle to speak again. I visited your shelters in Tel Aviv, and I think we have a lot to learn from each other. So I look forward to hearing the rest of the panel and really join in friendship and partnership with all of you to address the scourge of gender violence, not just because of COVID, but it's existed for too long. Thank you.
Thank you, Judge Harris Kluger, for important work for Sanctuary for Families. I especially liked it that you said that some of the innovations that you've had to come up with during this pandemic, you will also be using to go forward. I think that that's really an important lesson. Now we're going to go across the globe, Israel, and we're going to learn how COVID-19 affecting domestic violence. Our first guest in Israel is Zippi Brand-Frank, who is Deputy Mayor of Tel Aviv-Yafo and a member of the Parents Pay Attention Party. She was first elected to the City Council in 2013 and served as chair of the Audit Committee. And after she was elected in March 2019, she was appointed Deputy Mayor, Childhood Education for Young Families, and the City Council Gender Equality Committee. Deputy Mayor Brand-Frank, also a prominent media professional with over 10 years of experience. And I'm looking forward now to hearing from Deputy Mayor Brand-Frank.
So hello everyone, and I'm very honored to be here to learn and share the information on this international pandemic impacts and consequences. I think that the impact of the social distancing, as it was mentioned before, is yet far from being understood, and there's a lot that we are going to face and to handle as part of our responsibility as authorities. On mid-March, Israel went into lockdown. There is an increase, and since then, there is an increase in domestic abuse violence. During the pandemic, women were confined at home. It increased 3 times more than it was this time last year, since the restrictions came into effect. And we learned this from the WITSO, from the women Zionist times more. Actually, during the first month of the lockdown, we were not notified about the increase. It was interesting. We had no idea. We could have guessed that something is happening, and we realized there was a huge increase. Otherwise, we wouldn't. If school hadn't started, we wouldn't have known about. We couldn't give any support or help. Women actually didn't have anywhere to go during this first month, and they couldn't go out. They confined to their homes and were afraid to report. And a way to increase the points of contact with women when it is difficult for them to get away or to get out. Authorities, support systems need to get to the women, to the houses, to find a way in order to contact them. For example, there could be, for example, an app that could use to contact the authorities secretly. That's what we're trying to start working on. We should establish also a system of calls that women can use to alert us when they are in danger. This way they can ask the help secretly and feel protected. I think this is very important, to find a way to get to the houses much earlier than what we're doing right now. Maybe there should be a special, I read also that there were special buttons in some countries or to report violence quietly in pharmacies, for example, and to report about abusive partners that can be used secretly to contact. This is important. We're trying to put an emphasis on it. Everything should be advertised much more than what used before, because people need to know and they should get an access for these buttons and apps much easier than what happens in regular days. Also, our police came up with a list of 25 warning signs that might lead to potential violence behaviors, that may lead to violence to trace. And to make women much more aware of these violent behaviors and be able to tell or to run away or to escape much before it happens. Before it happens, actually. Many people blame violence on drinking when you look at this behavior, but that is only part of the picture. There are many other things that can be predictors of future violence. This list should be published and seen. We're making to get this known. Also, we believe we should find a way, we haven't done it yet, but the government should pay, government and authorities, also municipalities should pay nights in hotels or accommodation to help women to escape from abusive partners, safe houses for battered women and children. And also it should be advertised, it should be much more out there, especially during lockdowns. A woman should not have to search for it, and it should be out. We do hope there will be no, there'll be no, we hope there will never be another lockdown, but we should work on increasing and having more places for women to run away. As I mentioned, I didn't mention it yet, but also there were a lot of victims, a lot of children that were victims as well in our data. And I think, that's my personal opinion. We haven't discussed it yet in the municipality, but I think that children that were in danger, and I think it's important to discuss it maybe here, the children that were in danger were not responded during the pandemic. I don't know what happens with you, but we couldn't respond them because everyone was locked down. And I think it should have been allowed to keep their routine and continue their classes as usual. The teachers should have taken precautions, but children that are usually in danger should continue with their routine, although there is a pandemic. I know we should discuss it. They didn't have a chance to get away from their homes, 3-year-old, 4-year-old kid. And just having the kids confined to homes that endangered them, I think it might be enough to cause terrible outcome. And we should think of what we're doing. I think it's time for us to think out of the box. I think technology is there, and I think we should take advantage of it and continue this talk in order to really to try to think out of the box.
Thank you to Tel Aviv-Yafo Deputy Mayor Brian Frank. Both she and Judge Kluger using technology to try and help victims, and wanted to say that there's another New York-Israel connection with this our December 1st symposium to have someone correct, which is the Rhode Island Cornell University and Technion complex, and she exactly works with technology to help to keep victims safe. So here we have the connection with the New York and Israel. Now I'd like to introduce our last speaker, also from Israel, Yaacobson, who is chairperson of Bat Melech, and attorney Zilit, activist, philanthropist. Bat Melech is an organization that operates shelters, provides mental and legal help to female victims of domestic violence in the Orthodox community. And speaker Melech's legal department 13, and then was elected as person in 2015. So please, if you will share with us some of your insights on the pandemic and domestic violence community that you serve.
Thank you. Good evening from Israel and good afternoon in New York. One of the advantages of being the last speaker, I can say that it has been a very interesting and important webinar, and it is indeed an honor for me to join you today. I would like to thank Aviv-Yafo, Council for Public Diplomacy at the Israeli Consulate in New York, and Dana Russ from her team for putting today's program together. COVID-19, as we have heard today, has allowed us to raise issues of family violence to the center of the public stage in an urgent and pressing manner. But for those of us who deal with this subject on a daily basis, it is always top of our agenda. 1 in 7 women in Israel suffer from domestic abuse, and violence against Orthodox women is identical to that of the general public. One of the big differences is that of the 160,000 Orthodox households in Israel, most women in this sector have no access to social services or right-based organization. In many cases, Haredi Orthodox women in our community have no access to television, internet, or social media. In our community, women in abusive relationship do not take advantage of the social services that are available publicly to better women of the general public. Bat Melech maintains 2 of Israel's 14 physical shelters, which provide a safe haven for battered women and their children. At full capacity, we can host 24 women and 80 children in the shelters and transition apartments. This shelter operates under the supervision and partial financial support of the Ministry of Welfare. While living within our shelter, professional staff provide the women and children with psychological rehabilitation. The women learn to implement practical practices designed to enable this victim to regain their self-esteem, self-empowerment, and financial independence. In addition, we offer free legal services, a 24-hour hotline for women in distress. We know that family violence is universal and emerges within in all social and economic strata, and it appears within all religious affiliations. All victims of domestic violence go through a process which takes time till they are able to recognize their husband's behavior as abusive, until they are able to admit to themselves that they are trapped in a situation which is threatening and inappropriate. Once they recognize their situation, they need to have the knowledge of whom to turn to and the eventual courage to do so. All of these inherent beliefs prevalent within our Orthodox community increase the challenges and the complexity of our ability to raise awareness of domestic abuse within our close community. Violence against Orthodox women and any other women may express in forms of physical, sexual, emotional, and financial abuse. In addition, Orthodox women may suffer from a unique form of abuse, that is spiritual abuse. Traditional ultra-Orthodox educational material will not include mention of any sort of domestic violence. The outbreak of COVID-19 pandemic highlighted the most pressing need of women victims of family violence, forcing us to deal with increased real-time challenges. It became necessary for us to provide solutions to complex situations, but at the same time, afforded us the opportunity of making real progress in reducing family violence in our community. Since March 15, the Israeli government's Ministry of Justice reported a 35% increase in requests for protection and restraining order by women victims of family violence. And also us at Bat Melech, we have seen a 40% increase in calls to our emergency hotline. The ultra-Orthodox community in Israel has been particularly hard hit by the COVID-19 virus. 70% of reported coronavirus patients in Israel were from the Orthodox or ultra-Orthodox community. This brought about a total lockdown, confining hundreds of thousands of people to their homes. Having no access to television, internet, and social media, and with limited contact with anyone outside of their immediate communities, victims of family violence in the ultra-Orthodox community faced a complex set of realities. The very real or even perceived fear of sickness and death from COVID-19 virus triggered signs of the development of PTSD among members of the community. Women were reluctant to go out of the house to seek help due to the fear of being infected. Social distancing limited the woman's choices, separated her from a support group, and increased her partner's control. The economic shutdown and the monetary pressure also contributed to the level of stress. I believe it is necessary to state that many of these women live in large families blessed with 5 to 10 children and in small apartments. The pressure on the family is tremendous, and this caused an increase of abuse and violence. In addition to this increase in incidents of violence, we faced a challenge within the framework of the shelters operated by Bat Melech as a direct result of COVID-19. With that said, it is obvious that the appearance of domestic violence is not unique to our Orthodox community and not unique to the period of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our mission to reach Orthodox women wherever they may be is inherently more complicated than reaching women of more open societies, is the only media which is accessible to many women will not agree to openly address this critical issue. Therefore, we at Bat Melech must find more creative ways to be able to reach these women to save another life. Bat Melech has successfully taken innovative action target designed to penetrate the community in a discreet manner. For example, in attempt to reach every woman, we printed special stickers with our hotline number on them, and with the help of volunteers across the country, we were able to place them in visible venues. For the first time, we are making, just from the last few days, for the first time, we are making use of advertisement on buses in Orthodox communities. In order for real change to take place within our community structure, education is the key. We offer educational talks to mikveh staff, bride and groom instructors, colleagues, community rabbis, and others. Bestowing this responsibility upon the community leaders and service providers is new and perhaps even daring concept within Orthodox community. The rabbinical institution also has a great impact on this matter. Rabbis are influencers who can mediate and direct women to assistance should they identify or become aware of abuse in the community. To that end, we promote visits to our shelters, meeting and workshop for community rabbis and rebbitzin, so we can teach them how to address the complexities of this subject and to become aware of the danger of silencing and brushing off violence occurrences. As a result of our activism and groundbreaking encounters with the Orthodox community leaders and service providers, we see a steady annual increase in the number of calls to our emergency hotline. We have definitely begun to put our foot in new doors, and we have made a headway within the previously silent community. We at Melech are pioneering unique awareness and prevention program, which we believe can serve universally as a model for close, tight-knit communities of all religious and beliefs. We believe that is the joint responsibility of all community members to take part in combating domestic abuse. The COVID-19 crisis and using public outcries have potentially lifted the taboo on family violence in the community. We have real sense that people inside the community are willing to listen, and it has afforded us a chance to take action to reduce family violence in the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox community. COVID-19 is an opportunity for us. Given the strong interconnection between the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox community inside and outside of Israel, we need to find a way to work more closely with Orthodox community outside of Israel and involve them in the campaign. I hope that by cooperating together in the future, we can work together to reduce gender-based violence in the Orthodox and ultra-Orthodox Jewish communities and in other close and culturally sensitive traditional communities as well. Thank you for allowing me to share with you what we are doing at Bet Melech. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Zilit, for your insights. We have a few minutes for questions. I'm wondering, before we get to questions from everyone, should see if there are questions among the panelists. If anyone has something to say to one of your co-panelists, then this do it. And anybody? Just you've got to unmute. No? Well, then I'm going to read some of the questions. And I think you have to unmute because we have a question for each one of you. Try to do this. Commissioner Noel talked about upstander not being a bystander, which is so important. Westchester County, New York, have a high risk team that trains police and asks questions to ascertain the level of risk, victim, and family. Jackie Campbell risk assessment. Did the Commissioner want to comment about that?
Well, absolutely. I think it's important to be an upstander. I think we need to help survivors understand that once they tell us that we know the resources and where to go. But it's equally important that when that our providers in that space be informed. So when the police respond to a domestic violence call, they need to be aware of the issues. They need to be using the right tools to be able to assess the situation, to determine the risk, and to make take appropriate action based on that. So I think that the whole issue about the Jackie Campbell assessment is an excellent assessment. And we use it here in New York. There are many of our providers that do, and we've trained on that both with our local police department, and we've actually used it in some of our healthcare settings as well to be able to both assess the risk, understand, and make sure that we are connecting survivors to the appropriate resources based on that, based on the scoring of that risk assessment tool. So I think that it's definitely about ensuring that our points of information, our points of resources, and the systems that interact with survivors are well aware of those issues and using the appropriate tools. But also it's really important that at the local level, at the family level, at the neighbor level, at the level of ensuring that survivors know that there's someone that they can turn to who's down the hall who can help them understand how to reach out and what to do.
Thank you. If you know what the Jackie Campbell risk assessment is, which I also have to check, you Google according to one of the people who wrote, so please do that. Unless someone wants to explain it, but maybe we need to go on. We don't have so much time. There are a lot of comments from people who are working in the field who are giving phone numbers and hints for help and so on and so forth. I think everyone can see the chat and not just myself, but maybe on the Facebook page of the consulate and perhaps on ours, we will make a list of some of these because I don't think we can, go through them all now, but I think that they're important. Several people have said something along the lines of that if they don't think it's fair for the women to have to leave the house, move out to go to a shelter, what would be the possibility instead of removing the men, which is an interesting question. If anybody would like to answer that among our panelists. Anybody have something to say? I'm trying to read the questions and I can't see the participants.
I think that Judge Kluger wants to answer here.
So in New York, the victims do not have to leave. If they can go to the court, get an order of protection, an exclusionary order of protection, where the abuser has to leave. And that's regardless of whether he is the name on the lease or owns the apartment. There is the ability to have the abuser leaving. That said, I mean, we do have shelters, and for a variety of reasons, people do come to our shelters or other shelters. The domestic violence shelter system in New York is, thanks to the commissioner, is robust. It is very much about making the clients and their children feel comfortable and safe. So there is no requirement that she leave, but if she does, there is the ability to go to one of the shelters. And I say she, but we have had occasionally men in our shelter. But as you all know, for your experience, the vast majority of victims of domestic violence are women.
And I would just like to add to what Judy said just a minute ago, that I think it's really important that we provide options for survivors, right? They need to have options. It shouldn't just be about shelter. It should also be about how can we keep you at home safely if that's something that we can do. And so here in the city, we really have been looking at how to look at other options for survivors. What could we do? If we can exclude the abuser from the home, how can we keep you safe at home? Is that possible? Is shelter the right option? Is moving out of state the right option? So we need to make sure that we provide options for survivors. It's not just one answer. You need to be able to have options that fit your situation, and so that you can make decisions around your safety and that of your family. So thanks, Judy, for that. It's really important.
And shelter also has a lot of rules attached to it in New York. It is a confidential location for obvious reasons. There are rules around how late you can be out so while it is a safe environment, it's certainly not an environment that everybody wants to be in. And in New York also, we place people in a borough other than the borough that the abuse occurred for, again, obvious safety reasons. but you're uprooted from your community and your family and your children's schools. So it's an option, but as the commissioner said, it shouldn't be the only option.
I would
Okay,
like
thank you a lot. Somebody else want to say something? I don't want to interrupt.
I would like to add, in Israel, the shelters, I think also maybe in the state, the shelter are the last option. It's mean we have to make sure that all the women, all the families have safe haven in their homes. But if there is no other chance of doing that, the only chance is the only option is shelter. And the shelters are home. They're not institution. It's much more than just to protect the women, of course, but it gave them a hope, a chance to rehabilitation there and their children. So, and I invite you all, it will be honor for us. You will all visit in Israel in our shelter.
Thank you. A lot of people are asking, will the information on the panelists in the program be available? And yes, the webinar is going to be on the Facebook page of the Israel Consulate, and when Adva ends, she can make sure that you have the information for that page, and we'll put it on the Remember Women Institute's Facebook page as well. We're almost out of time. So one of the panelists have something else to say?
I actually had a question for Zilt as she talked about shelter. I had heard long ago that you had a shelter where men went to. Is that accurate? Or still in Israel? Where the abusive
I'm not familiar with that.
Excuse me?
I'm not familiar with that.
Okay, thank you.
A shelter for men. Maybe she is.
Okay, thank you.
I think if anybody else, I don't want to, I don't want to interrupt anybody, but I think
I do have a question from Israel. It's Carol, Rochelle.
Oh,
okay. Is there counseling for children who have been observant and part of domestic violence?
Yeah, so absolutely yes, it's Sanctuary and other organizations, because we know the impact on children is profound, and it not only impacts their relationship, obviously, with the person who has committed the harm, but also it frays the relationship with the mom, who often has left the abuser, and the child is resentful about that. So we do a lot of counseling, mom and child together to repair that.
Thank you.
I actually have a question. Just to New York. I mean, what's your point of view? I was mentioning it in the end of my speaking about. I was curious to know what is your point of view about children in danger during lockdown? Should classes be opened, or how do you treat them? Like, how do you take care of them?
Well, I'll start, and the commissioner can. Yeah, it's very challenging, and there's a video from Israel that's kind of very comical that went around about this mom who is dealing with trying to
I saw it.
Child, right? It's terrific. It's
no, but this is a normative family. That's a normative family. I'm asking about children who are in danger.
No. My point is that even in a family that isn't impacted, there is tremendous stress. So it's complicated. I was very surprised that the New York City schools closed completely. That's another thing that did not happen, again, maybe for a couple of days around other incidents, but safety first. It's a tough decision. That's all I can say.
I will just add that it truly is, I echo everything that Judy has said. It really is a challenge. And we have a specific agency that's charged with really the well-being of children. That's our Administration for Children. and they have community centers in neighborhoods, which are some of our, where we have some of our highest incidents. They have been trying to push out more information, be it on paper and online and on sites where children might go, looking to teachers if they suspect anything or see anything as they're instructing online. They're still supposed to report if they suspect or if a child says something, but it certainly is much more challenging, and it raises lots of questions. I mean, we've seen
Right.
a lot of opportunity in going online in so many ways, but this is absolutely one of the challenges, just like it is with intimate partner violence, when you can't get out to make a call, when you can't text to make a call. We hear survivors going into the shower.
When you don't understand.
Right. And
When
so
you
we
don't understand even the situation, you know, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old or something.
right. And that you're absolutely right on that. And so we are very dependent, I think, on community collaterals to be able to, if they see something, to report that and say something. But sometimes these children aren't even going out, right? Not even for a walk with the dog or anything else. How do you do that? So it certainly has been a challenge for the agency that's charged with this. And they've been pushing much more out online and trying to just make everyone aware that they still have an obligation to report and look out for our most vulnerable, which are children.
Thank you, everybody. I hate to interrupt because this is really so important to hear, but we're really out of time. I want to thank everybody for joining us today. Thank the Israel Consulate and Consul Aviv-Yafo and all of the other help, the technical help from the Consulate Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and especially Donna Russ, who's been working with me to get this all together. And to thank our experts, Commissioner Cecile Noel, Judge Judy Harris Kluger, City Mayor Zippi Brand-Frank, Aviv-Yafo, and Zilit Yaacobson. And just before we end, I'm going to ask Consul Adva to give us a few final words.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you for joining, and thank you even more for staying. This program today was very moving for me, and I will not repeat the thank you because you already heard it, and I really respect and thank everyone who was building this program and joining this program, especially not only our speakers, but the initiators of this, which is Rochelle and Dana Roos from my team. I think that this webinar demonstrates how much it's important, especially in this time, to share information, how much we can learn from each other. I learned from all sides, from Israel and New York, things that I think should be important for me personally. And of course, so many professionals are here. So I assume and I hope it benefit your own work so you could implement with your beneficiaries. This is only one part of the Israeli consulate work that we're trying to share knowledge and to show the shared values between Israel and the US. We will be happy to share with you more information and to invite you to more of our online webinars. For now, I could tell you that next week we're going to host Israeli and American professor from NYU to share mathematical models about exit strategy with coronavirus. It's a very different topic, but today it's relevant for everyone. So it will be a pleasure to see you in this program as well. So last thing before I will end, we will wait a few minutes when everybody will leave the meeting. But if you have anything more to write or to ask, we'll be happy to share your concerns or questions to the other speakers that we're in touch with. If you have a specific question, we'll be happy to facilitate it for you, either with this chat here or with the email you got from us with the registration link, or in our any other social media accounts that you are more welcome than to tune in. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. be safe. תודה רבה. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Commissioner Noel, and thank you, Zilit, that I see that you're still here. It was
Thank you so
moving.
much to everyone. I really enjoyed this. It was quite an honor to be here with everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
It was an honor. It was an honor for me. Thank you.
Continue the important work.
And yeah, I
Good
really
luck.
mean it. Thank you very much. I learned so much, and thank you.